Okay, so this video is going to be over my first year progression of learning Blender. And again, although I'm titling this my first year progression, I've only been learning Blender for 7 months. I started learning Blender May 13th of 2024. I'm recording this video on December 27th, 2024. Just like majority of the people learning Blender, you hear about the infamous donut tutorial. I did attempt this donut tutorial and I gave up very quickly. If I'm brutally honest, I don't think a beginner tutorial should have a 100-part series. I think it's way too overwhelming for someone just starting Blender or being labeled as a quote-unquote beginner. I would think it should be no longer than 30 minutes. So I gave up on that really quick. I couldn't even find what I did do. I think I may have just deleted it. So I ran across this tutorial called Blender Beginner Tutorial from CG Fast Track. It's called Sword and Stone, and I actually really enjoyed this, and this is what I felt like a beginner tutorial should look like. So now I'm going to show you what I created. And so I also took that knowledge that I learned and I created this katana. And so remind you, these first two things that I showed you, I did within the first 2 weeks of me starting Blender. So in my mind, I felt like I was off to a great start. So I enjoyed that tutorial so much that I did decide to purchase the course at CG Fast Track. And so essentially almost all my knowledge I learned in Blender in the first couple of months came from the courses over at CG Fast Track. And I actually cannot recommend this enough. And they also have a Discord for members to help each other. And I'm in a Discord and I'm helping people out every single day. It's a great investment. Now we're moving on to the next project, which was supposed to be kind of like an enchanted room, you know, with books and potions and things of that matter. This again was following a tutorial from CG Fast Track, but I did put my own spin on it. Again, I added like the fairies in the scene, I added like this eyeball in the middle, and with the animation I added sounds and things of that matter. So now I'm going to play that animation.
Welcome. I've been waiting for you. Look into my eye. Tell me, what do you see?
Okay, and then I proceeded to just practice doing a little more animation practice. These are very simplistic in nature, but again, these were still following tutorials here. Then I practiced making these crystals on this rock, again following the tutorial, and I decided to, you know, try to add some moss on the bottom. The moss didn't look too real, but because I'm kind of blurring it, you can't really see that. But I do think this came out really well. It kind of looks real for the most part. And then I continued doing some hard surface modeling. So I modeled these barrels, but then the materials I didn't make, I got them off Blender Market and I just applied them to the scene basically. Try to make these photorealistic keys. I think for the most part they do kind of look real. Maybe the shape up here, I don't know if you ever see anything like that, but I do think these actually do look real. But again, just continue to practice hard surface modeling. And then I tried to kind of add those into a scene here. I created the cage. Obviously those are the barrels I created previously. The keys here on the ground. I got the lock comes from Blender Market. I created the chain, and obviously the dragon also came from Blender Market and the rest of it. But I put it all together in this scene. But again, just continue to practice hard surface modeling. And still following tutorials from CG Fast Track. This was to make this axe, which I think looks really good. The glowing part on the axe head, it doesn't look the way I wanted it to look, but overall I was satisfied with the axe. But then I also did decide to redo it and try to add my own design to it. And so this was me doing it over, but trying to add my own design to it. So for the most part, it's all the same with the exception of I wanted to add like a snake to it. And I wanted it to kind of look like old and rusted and ancient. I mean, almost. But so the snake part actually took a long time, but it was actually kind of cool how I came up with the idea. I used AI to generate an image, and I did several iterations over and over and over until I got something that I liked. And I wanted it to be like separated shapes. So all these shapes are actually kind of triangles, squares, and circles. And I basically traced those with polygons, and I essentially baked a map to be able to achieve this. It probably isn't the most convenient way to do this now that I think about it, because honestly you can kind of sculpt it, which would probably be a little faster, but it's easier to get those hard to find edges by I guess manually creating the polygons and then beveling it instead of sculpting though. But yeah, so then I thought that I had enough knowledge to go in and tackle my own project at this point. And I initially just had no idea where to start. And again, I was still practicing the hard surface modeling. I wanted to make some type of weapon. I decided I wanted to make a scythe. So I actually used AI to generate some concept art. If I can hide this, I can show you the concept art in the back. This was the concept art. But I decided to not make it double-sided, but I used AI to generate this concept art, and then I proceeded to try and do what I could. Again, when I first started, I had no idea where to start. This will look better in this mode. It came out looking okay. It wasn't completely disappointed. I still wasn't really sure how to light a scene, but I knew I wanted it to be dark. I mean, I'm still learning now. I still feel like the lighting could be a little better. I'm just gonna give this an emissive material. But yeah, I think it came out all right. I did struggle in the beginning because I just didn't know. I didn't know what to do. I'm actually gonna render an image and see what it comes out like. And so this is what the render came out like. I just added some more lighting, but I still want it to look dark and dim, but give it a little more lighting. But yeah, so this is a project that I tackled upon myself. I did struggle in the beginning because I didn't know where to start or what to do, but I think it came out okay. As far as the timeline goes, right now we're looking at the beginning of July. Okay, and continuing hard surface modeling, I made this helmet. I think this came out really good. I just wasn't a fan of doing it. It was kind of like really hard to make, but I was very satisfied with the end result. And again, this is still following tutorials from CG Fast Track. And I kind of had my thought process during the time was, if I just followed every single tutorial in the world, I would retain all that knowledge and just have the knowledge to do anything that I wanted. But I quickly realized that is not the case, and you actually, when you're following tutorials, it's kind of like learning things hypothetically, and it's not until you actually have to do something on your own that the knowledge is really retained. Okay, so then we move on to this statue. of a head that I created. This is once again still following tutorials. Again, I'm still in that mindset, do every single tutorial I can do from CG Fast Track. This was essentially hard surface modeling and an organic shape, which like a face, which is not easy to do. This is actually really a struggle to do. But through this, I discovered sculpting, and I much rather prefer sculpting when it comes to organic shapes. But I also created like a little short render too that I'm going to post now. And so again, and then I added the statue to this scene, and again I got to experiment with a little bit of sculpting with this. You can see the little details in the horns, and it was through this that I realized, you know what, I actually really love sculpting. So I decided to try to go more in depth and like just specifically learn sculpting. And right now, as far as the timeline goes, we are in the beginning of August with this. Okay, and side note, almost forgot, I thought that I would like ArcViz, architectural visualization, because I used to play The Sims a lot when I was younger, and you know, I was like, oh well, ArcViz is kind of like equivalent to building a house in The Sims, and I enjoyed that, so I may enjoy ArcViz, right? And so I found some blueprints off a website that's based here in New York City, that's where I live, and I was like, okay, I'm just going to take these blueprints and I'm just going to bring them to life and furnish them. And so here, this was like my first attempt, and honestly it was kind of like playing The Sims and putting furniture where it belongs, but you kind of want the result to be realistic for the most part, although I've seen renders that don't look 100% realistic and someone got paid for that. But so I actually thought this was the direction I was going to go, but I actually found this so boring. I just couldn't do it. So I did this, and this was the extent of my ArcViz journey. I just found this so boring, I couldn't continue with it. So more tutorials, still on CG Fast Track, and this was the course over modeling a car. And this was as far as I got. I found myself struggling, not that I thought it was hard, but I would just do it and I felt like I was forcing myself to do it, and I didn't really understand what was happening. Initially I thought, oh, maybe I don't like 3D modeling as much as I thought I did, or you know, I just found myself getting bored and struggling through it, and I would just, you know, quit and go do something else that entertained me more. But what I realized was I didn't find 3D modeling boring, I just found making a car boring. And this is where I realized that there's so many different directions that you can go when in the 3D modeling journey, and you have to figure out what you like amongst 3D modeling, because there's so many different specializations. Again, the man who created the dragons in Game of Thrones, his specialization is creating dragons, so he gets enjoyment out of creating dragons, and he got a big break for making dragons. I've also seen where someone, they specialize in making reload animations, and he got hired to make reload animations in Call of Duty and Halo, I believe. And so I realized that, oh, okay, I just don't find modeling a car entertaining whatsoever. I don't care about modeling a car. If I ever need a car, I guess maybe I could power through trying to model it, or I would just get a model from somewhere else. But I also realized when you're making a scene, you're not going to model every single thing in your scene. So I gave up on this, and I realized sculpting is what I really like, and I do preference making like organic things. So I decided to focus on sculpting after this. Okay, so now I have a little more clarity as to which direction I want to go. And again, I believe I want to sculpt, and I want to create like organic creatures. I find that the most interesting. So I discovered CG Boost, and CG Boost has great videos on their YouTube, and they also have some great courses. So with CG Fast Track, it's all about teaching you like the fundamentals of certain topics in Blender, while CG Boost is about going really in depth about a specific topic. So they have courses over sculpting. They have a free beginners one, and then you have, you know, Mastered in Sculpting, and you have Creature Forge. You know, these are all about learning how to sculpt in Blender. And I purchased these and it was worth all the money. So this is what you do with the Mastered in Sculpting. I didn't 100% finish because in my mind I purchased the course to learn all of the intricacies of sculpting in Blender, and I did feel like when I got to this point I had learned enough, and so essentially I wanted to move on to trying to do something solo. But I will say, with learning how to sculpt comes retopologizing, and I had seen comments about how some people literally wanted to quit 3D modeling because retopology was a nightmare, and I eventually ran across that nightmare. But yeah, so this is what this is as far as I got, and because I wanted to go into my own direction. I wanted to give it fur, but I could never get it to look 100% the way I wanted. But yeah, so this is where I got with this. So then I tried to tackle my own project with sculpting, and I had this idea where I want to create like Pokemon and kind of make like National Geographic style videos, but with Pokemon. And at first I was like, I'm gonna sculpt the Pokemon, but sometimes I realized that might be a little too much, although a lot of the Pokemon are kind of simple in geometry. But so this is my first attempt. I was trying to make Crustle. I wasn't trying to make it look one-to-one, but maybe make them look a little more realistic and not as cartoonish, but still look like Pokemon. And I feel like in the Detective Pikachu series, they did a great job with riding that line, but not trying to make them look 100% like realistic animals like we've seen in real life, but staying true to Pokemon, but not looking cartoonish. So that's where I was going for. And so this was my interpretation of making Crustle. I didn't want the shell to look 100% the same because in the Pokédex entry, it states that the Crustle shells actually look different based upon where they live. So because of that, I was like, okay, I have freedom to do something a little different with the shell. Although the shell still doesn't look 100% the way I wanted, because I technically just took a texture and threw it on because I didn't really know how to make it look 100% the way I wanted. But so I sculpted this and then I retopologized it, right? So at this point I learned a little bit about retopology. I retopologized it and then I texture painted it. This was actually really fun to make. I saw a technique with making the claws, which was really cool. I basically traced the claw. I basically got an image of a claw and I traced it with vertices, and then I basically extruded and scaled it, extruded and scaled it, extruded and scaled it, and then I basically just added it to like my base mesh in sculpting, and then I basically just combined it all together. But yeah, so this was cool. I was like, okay, I'm getting the hang of this, let me continue. And again, for a timeline, we're looking at the middle of August with this. Oh, and I also added bones to it. I had no idea what I was doing. I watched like one YouTube video and then I added bones so that I could try to pose it. So continuing, I decided to move to Executor. So this was Executor that I made and sculpted myself. So the leaves, because again, I kind of wanted it to look realistic. So these leaves actually came, I kind of took these leaves from an asset basically, which is why they look so good. If I did that myself, it definitely would not look like that. But then and then I took this texture. This is obviously the texture of a coconut tree, and I added to it. But then the texture of the heads, I kind of did that myself. I still wasn't really sure how to do it because the heads technically kind of look like unripe coconuts, green coconuts, and not brown coconuts, but they couldn't be plain green. But yeah, I added shape keys for each of the heads. so that they could do things. So this is the middle head opening and closing his mouth. The left head. Ooh, that's not the left. He can open and close his mouth. But yeah, so I added shake keys for each of the heads. Again, I also added bones, but again, at this point, I had no idea what I was doing. I watched one YouTube video and thought I could do something with bones. But yeah. So yeah, I was proud of this, and again, I retopologized it. So again, I'm like, okay, I definitely got the hang of this. I'm doing this. I'm doing it. I'm doing a good job, right? He also has no ankles, but but yeah, so I'm like, okay, let me continue. And I also did attempt some other things that I gave up very, very quickly on, but I did go back to CG Boost, and this is when I purchased the Creature Forge course. And from that course, I started to make my dragon. So this was the dragon that I created. I spent a lot of time on this because this was my first time doing a lot of things. And again, I didn't follow the course 100% because I made my own creature. So I sculpted this. This was my first time like actually texturing something. Like I didn't actually just slap a texture on it. I started learning Substance Painter. My first time using Substance Painter. To do this, I was baking maps. I almost rage quit when it came to the retopology of this. I had to delete it and start over twice. I had to take a break for like 4 or 5 days, watch some more videos, go back at it again before I actually finished it. And the retopology took longer than actually sculpting the dragon. But again, I learned a lot. I added bones. I actually have a better understanding of the bones. I then also added a rig too. And so we can see the rig here where I can control all the different elements of the dragon. I can control his feet, his wings, tail. I have spent probably over 300 hours working on this project. Do I think that it should have taken that long? No, not really, but this is my first time doing a lot of things. And I learned a lot. Like I learned so much doing this. But also created these poses I can click. So now he's laying down. I can have him sitting up, although his eyes. Now he's in that pose. But yeah. And now I'm gonna just show some render images that I took of my creature. Okay, and that's going to be my 7th month journey learning Blender. And if you're curious, over that 7-month period, again from May 14th to December 27th, I have accumulated 1,091 hours in Blender.